Good evening and welcome to this evening session on BIC Films. Loralir Sadhukatha, Tales from Our Childhood. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Mukul. Um, we have today the filmmaker Mukul Haloi in conversation with Sunanda Bhat. Before I hand over to Sunanda, for those of you who may be here for the first time and want to receive updates from us, do sign up to our mailing list by visiting our website. We will be posting the bios of both today's panelists in the chat box that you see at the bottom of your screen. Next to the chat box is the Q&A box. Do post your questions you may have for the filmmaker on the Q&A box. With that, welcome everyone and over to you, Sunanda.
Hi, thanks Raghu, and welcome Mukul. I'm delighted, we are delighted as from Vikal Bengaluru to have you with us. I'll just say a few words about Mukul. I mean, he's a very interesting filmmaker, young filmmaker, graduate from FTII, who's made several very interesting short films and this feature-length documentary. And I'm sure he has many more to make. And this particular film was part of his fellowship at TIS Mumbai. And Mukul, this film is for me, it was very poetic and contemplative. You know, through your memories and reflections, you kind of visit a time where, you know, the might of the state clashed with this whole idea of self-determination that local revolutionaries wanted as an independent state for an independent state of Assam. And can you tell us a little bit about give us a little bit of background of this agitation in brief, and also tell us how this idea for this film came about.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot, Sunanda, for streaming the film online. I think this is one of the first online streaming for this film in India. So I'm really glad that a lot of people have, messaged me and they have shared what they feel about the film. Thanks a lot, and thanks for inviting me for the conversation as well. Yeah, so I mean, just to set a background for the film, for those who have seen the film, I mean, I think you got an idea about how that movement had actually impacted the people in Assam. So how did it come up, or how it has begun? So we have to go back to pre-independence. I mean, during that time, early 20th century, and Assam was part of that whole freedom movement and all. But at the same time, there was a kind of a separate movement, more of a cultural movement to declared Assam as a independent nationhood, independent state or independent country. So I think a lot of other linguistic communities also, went that way before independence. But in 1947, when the country got independence and all other parts of the subcontinent were put into that whole Indian state. So I think that's how, I mean, that divide has started widening, because in 1920s and 30s, during that time, along with joining in the freedom movement of India, Assamese, a lot of Assamese intellectuals, writers, and cultural activists, they had openly defended an idea of an independent country for Assam. Like if you look at literature, if you look at the songs, even in the songs of Dr. Bhupen Hazarika and all the popular mediums. So it actually refers to the state of Assam as as a nation, as a desh, like Bharat as a desh. So the Assam home deck, it says like Assam as a country, Assam as a separate national identity. So I mean all those cultural and kind of a thing which was in people's consciousness, I think that started getting more and more developed, and there was also a question of illegal immigration into India, which was happening. It was happening to a lot of different parts of India as well, because of communal tensions between. Yeah, so as a cultural imagination, that idea of a country was always there, in Assamese, mainly in the whole northeastern states, different kind of cultural identity and looking at their own community as a separate, separate national identity. So and also there was the issue of immigration, which was happening from pre-independence till 1971, till the creation of Bangladesh, and a lot of refugees from East Bengal and which is now Bangladesh, they have come to Assam. They have settled and they have involved. So that was also a very pertinent question for that whole idea about the Northeast and Assam demography, cultural threat, all those sort of things. So all these things have actually created a certain kind of background to the Assam movement, which happened in 1980s. That was led by the students, the All Assam Student Union, and that was completely an anti-immigrant movement that and also the question of right over resources, natural resource or all sort of things, and all this movement, it looked at the Indian state or the central government, or that whole machinery is working with the Indian state as the other, like the other and self, we and them, like, and that relationship was looked at as a kind of a colonial relationship, that
Hmm.
like Assam and Northeast being of a kind of a resource frontier, there is vast natural resources, coal, tea, oil,
Hmm.
and all the forest and river, that water resource and all. So it was definitely was harnessed, and it was
Hmm.
used for national benefit, national as in benefit for
Hmm.
the whole country's economy. But people were not being able to what you say, that people are not having control over those resources in the localites, or maybe you say like people of Assam, suppose, those economic regions were also very dominant in this whole thing. It was
Hmm.
not just anti-immigration sentiment, but like to have a right over land and also the resources which is in
Hmm.
natural world. So those two things actually culminated into being that uh, Assam movement, and that
Okay.
went on, and
Yeah.
they signed that Assam Accord and all, and
Yeah.
that all Assam student union, they went into the democratic kind of way of protesting, and at the same time, ULFA being one of the, you can say, the extremists from the same movement, you can say. So they
Hmm.
went on a different way, and later on they actually took a different path
Hmm.
ideologically as well. So briefly, I think I'm
Okay. But yeah, I mean, I think what is really interesting about your film is the form, the way you juxtapose these very visual, quiet, meditative images with the kind of, impending kind of, not impending, but the background, the narratives of conflict and violence, which is more a sense than rather than than a visual. And I mean, that is very interesting. And how did you arrive at that? Are you happy with the way the film turned out? And can you tell us about how you conceived this idea, this way of making the film?
So I started making this film in 2016, and I
Mm.
was in the Film Institute, and so I finished it by 2018.
Mm.
So I was heavily influenced by my practice of fiction film, because before that I mainly worked with short fictions, and
Mm.
also have seen a lot of fictional films. Documentary
Mm.
also we have worked on, but not that
Mm.
extensively as we did in fiction. I mean,
Mm.
in the institute, I'm saying. So I think the basic idea to work with this film had a little bit of fictional, kind of an inspiration
Mm.
about approaching the script, or approaching the whole visual design, or even shooting it, doing the sound as well. So the process and the form, actually both were interdependent. Like the form, it had gradually developed. I mean, during the edit, actually it took the final shape, and because I had a kind of an idea what the film would look like, or what the film is going to be about.
Mm.
Certain things I was very clear about, like not having a lot of interviews of
Mm.
the shareholders, stakeholders of the
Mm.
society. Like, I mean, like suppose specialists on this issue, or or the ULFA members or ULFA leaders, I didn't want to bring those opinions to the film. So that was definitely there because I was trying to work around stories which were actually present in the local narrative, like how suppose there is a sequence with my mother, like who had experienced that movement from a different way, like being at home and the Alpha members coming and taking shelter in our house, our home. So she had experienced that whole movement from a very personal way, from very day-to-day kind of practice. So I was more interested in those kind of approaches, and that were people, my friends, and people of my age, basically from the generation of 90s. They had also experienced. They were growing up during that time, and there is a certain mix of fantasy and as well as strong idealism regarding that whole thing, because that image of the revolution was also being put forward by a lot of poems, a lot of literary pieces and all newspapers and all. So we grew up reading that, seeing people who were in that alpha group, and also they're writing poems, they were doing some cultural activities. So it actually created an image of a revolutionary in our mind. So that image was definitely there. So I wanted to explore that kind of an image, which not just us, not just the youth, but as a whole, I think that whole society, it had somehow accepted that image of a rebel led. Yeah. So yeah, then coming back to the form, I wanted to deal with these kind of things, like fragments from the past. Like there was a play there were a lot of plays, school in school functions, people used to perform and all. It also had those elements from that imagination, like there will be a educated boy like who is unemployed and who wants to go and join Alpha, and there'll be a sister who is trying to convince him not to go the armed way. So all the sort of archetypes also played a very important role in proceeding that whole revolution. So I wanted to actually explore all those things, like how people who are not specialists or expert or not written about those movements theoretically, and but perceived it in a very personal way, like from day-to-day things. So yeah, and then am I going the right way? Or
No, of course, absolutely. You're the filmmaker. We are here to listen to you. But this thing of, I mean, you're talking about that you all were very close to the revolution. The revolution actually came to your doorstep. That's what your mother says. And, it is a very strong part of your life. And you also mentioned earlier when we spoke, you said that whenever you'll meet, you'll keep talking about this, right? In your conversations, your friends, family, and all that. So there's a scene with your mother, when you're talking with her, that she says, she's talking about the excesses of the state. And you kind of seem to, at least that's what I got a sense of, that you seem to kind of guide her towards also talking about the violence from the ULFA side. So were you in the film trying to balance out the two opposing things? Were you trying to have a non-confrontational kind of approach through this film?
no, I mean not non-confrontation, but the ULFA. I mean, if you look at the evolution of their, I mean, like from formation to the demise, you can say. I mean, that whole idea. So actually, in the late 90s, they have gone through a very messy period of Assam's history. That killed a lot of people, like including people I know, or like everyone would know. I mean, in Assam, that some or the other. So, and that was a complete ideological. I mean, ruckus. Actually, they I mean, enrolled a lot of people who don't have any, belief or thought about this whole thing, but just enrolled like a Jawan in the army, because of like with salaries and all. So what ULFA did, they also, I mean, did a lot of inhuman acts and all. So I thought that if I don't talk about all these things, I think it is going to be very unfair. Also, there are a lot of things that are not there in the film. I mean, I was also asked why those things are not there, like the killings of the North Indian migrant laborers in Upper Assam and sort of thing. So I mean, you have to, as a filmmaker, I should bring those things, right? I mean, like I can't glorify ULFA in a way that they are the
Sure. Yeah. But was there a, like when you showed the film to people at home or even people who are very ULFA sympathizers, did they kind of react in any negative way? Because people have an idea of how revolution should be represented in film, in cinema. And I'm just wondering whether you've had feedback like that way.
Yeah, it's a lot of different kind of feedbacks. I mean, one of my friends said it's more about the film has become more about the violence. It has become more about how many people army has killed. Someone said like that. Then the film was also shown to a lot of ULFA leaders and members. They didn't have much thing to say. I don't know, like maybe not the way they had thought about the film.
Yeah.
So different spaces, like suppose if it is a space where people actually see films and all, they react differently. They also talk about the film and its, I mean, design and also like how it has
Visual.
been, yeah. And also in other spaces, maybe in an academic space, the debate goes in a different way. Like the idea of representation and what is left behind and what is not shown in the film. It goes on more in that direction.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So I mean, thanks for sharing your short films with me. It was really nice to see them. And I'd like to show some clips along the way because I feel that in your film, you've really, you managed to capture the atmosphere so well, and the sense of being in a certain place through many different modes, and I mean, I've been watching your films and thinking about it for the last week, and I mean, it's been quite a pleasure. So Raghu, can you play clip one from, so this is a clip from his short film called Days of Autumn. Please make a note of the sound too.
পলাশৰ জুই নুমাল এতিয়া কাল আৰু চতিয়ান বলক ও অতীত বহাগৰ ধুমুহাৰ কিমান সপোন সৰি গ'ল তাৰ কোনে ৰাখে খতিয়ান কলং কপিলি ডিজুৰ পাৰত ককা দেউতাৰ হাড় বুঢ়ী আইতাৰ কলিজাৰে গজে বন নহৰুৰ ফুল উৰুখা পানীয়ে উটাই নিয়ক মৰা মকৰাৰ খোলা আমাৰ পলসে খাৰুৱা কৰক কলঙৰ দুটি কুল আমাৰ নাতিৰ নতুন কামৰ নাঙলৰ শিৰলুত আমি সাৰ পাম সপোন অন্ধ যি গলিত আমি থাকোঁ তাৰ নয়ন জুলিত সিহঁতৰ ভৱিষ্যত
Yeah, so can you talk about that a bit, please? Because, the atmospherics, the way you get a feel, the mood of the film is very interesting. I mean, Days of Autumn, it's available on Vimeo for everybody to watch. It's about this transition, no, from autumn to winter. Isn't that, it's like capturing a moment. Can you?
Yeah, specifically, is anything specific should I talk about?
No, just that how you design this kind of the ambience of how you capture the mood. Like there are so many elements in your films which I have seen, like a window or the inside and the outside, and of course the characters which we can talk about later. But that thing that you are able to capture and bring in. So I was just.
So I think one of the most important elements, I mean, in cinema, definitely everyone knows about it, that is sound. And I wanted to work around sound because sound is something which we can't see, like it is not visible, like that we can't describe a sound to someone. Like when we are making a film, we can say that my image is going to look like this. Maybe it is that the wall will be red, maybe, or it's going to be green. But in terms of sound, it's something which doesn't have a physical body. I mean, you can't show it to someone. So that's why I think there is a lot of scope while working around sound, and it definitely creates an atmosphere and ambience that is its functional way. I mean, uses also. But again, I mean, it can create a different world completely. Like which can be also it's beyond that physical reality of a thing. So particularly about this short film, we did it in FTII. This was my second year project, and it was shot inside a studio. And I had written this script thinking about my home in Assam. So we had a lot of complexities how to shoot this film. But luckily, we could shoot the film, and it looked somehow, believable that it is shot in Assam. But then when the sound came in, we came back home and we recorded the sound in the real location. And when we took that to studio and designed it and mixed it, then it completely changed that whole that space. It feels like it's actually shot in Assam, with all the sound of very specific sound of nature, and like particularly about the season and all. So definitely it is a kind of functional approach of going to sound. And also that the other thing, like, which it's like it can create a completely different world, maybe a world of dream or a world of beyond that physicality. Like I try to work with that in my next short also in Hormua, which is my final film, and also in the docu, like it somehow gives a flight to the image, as if like it kind of an floating. You give a sense of floating into the image, and it floats to the next one. You are also floating along with it. So that kind of an evocative space I wanted to create with all my short films. Mundane things, but there is also beauty in that whole day-to-day work, day-to-day living of people. So the sound was actually important in that creating that space,
So I'd like to show one more clip, and then we'll bring in Rahul Rabha, who's the sound designer and who works with Mukul. Raghu, can you show? Yeah. It's from the same film. Can you move your cursor?
ঠাণ্ডাটো লাহে লাহে পৰিবলৈ লৈছে। মাটিবোৰ শুকাই কৰকৰীয়া মাৰিব এতিয়া। গছৰ পুলিবোৰত পানী দিবই লাগিব।
আপোনাৰো কাম নাই। গছ পুলি ৰুই ৰুই গোটেই বাৰীখন হাবি কৰি পেলাইছে। ডায়েবেটিছ থকা মানুহ স্কুলৰ পৰা আহি অকমান জিৰাব লাগে। নাই কথা নুশুনে। বয়সৰ লগে লগে মানুহে অকণমান লোভ মোহবোৰ ত্যাগ কৰিব লাগে। নাই হেল্ল'
হেল্ল' তুমি কোৱা নাই এতিয়াও?
হেল্ল' বাবা
মই ৰাস্তাত আছো, মই ভালকে শুনা নাই।
হেল্ল'
হেল্ল'
হেল্ল' শুনিছনে?
মই ভালকে শুনা নাই, মই ৰাস্তাত আছো এতিয়া।
হেল্ল'
Yeah, so I wanted to show this clip also because you talked about the everydayness of things and how the poetics behind that, and I think it's beautifully depicted here. You know, putting cream on her hands and the calling her son who's outside. But can we get Rahul in, Raghu?
Yeah, I've just promoted that.
So Rahul is
Rahul.
also a graduate of FTI and has worked with Mukul on many of his films.
Yeah, he worked, he was the designer of, sound designer of the docu mainly. The two shots, other two shots, I mean, they were different.
Oh, okay, okay.
But
Oh, okay.
Rahul works with me, I mean, like,
Okay.
a lot of short works on it.
Hi, Rahul.
Hello everyone.
Hi. So, can you talk a little bit about how you designed the sound for Tales from Our Childhood?
Basically,
What
it's
was the
very
concept?
important to know about the concept, what Mukul thinks about this film. And Mukul has a great sense of sound design, so most of the things he sorted out for me. He told me like what are the things necessary for the film. Actually, I just need to follow the mood of the film.
Yeah.
The mood is very important. What is the feeling and the tonality of sound? He's very particular about the tonality of some specific sounds, and which creates the main ambience and this atmosphere.
Can you give an example?
Just like the bird sound in the evening sequence. So he was very like he needs some kind of particular bird which will give that evening feeling, because in Assam there's lots of birds. In the evening you can hear lots of birds, but you need to choose few birds, one or two birds which can give you that kind of feeling. So I remember that we were like trying out some different sounds, different bird elements, but we stuck to somewhere. We definitely had to stick to something. Then we find out like this is working, then we move ahead to another sequence. So especially like this rain sequence and thunder, the thunder, how you develop the thunder, when it should come, it should have a particular timing, so which creates the impact of sound, and it gives that whole that feeling of this grandness, or this it's all about the particular sounds which you comes at the right time and right moment. It will create a massive impact in the film.
That's right.
So there is certain things, I mean, like I have grown up in a village and I still live there, and it's very sparsely populated. I mean, not many people, and I mean it's like a jungle only. So a lot of different natural elements you can hear of, from bird to insects and all. And there are specific things about them, like at what time of the day, which one which one comes and creates that mood. Suppose even in Assamese literature, people talk about the noon. I have tried to touch upon that in the days of autumn also. The noon, the feeling of noon, the melancholy of a certain autumn noon.
Yeah.
That is actually,
Yeah.
that is enhanced by the sound of the dove, dove queen, the bird of
Yeah.
the sound
Yeah.
of the bird. So that was one of the prime thing, for me. Like that was the sound for the film, for that whole film.
Yeah.
Particular sound, maybe you can
I can recall that.
summarize that whole. So yeah.
So this is very
And,
important. Mukul
yeah.
is like very particular about sound, and he himself recorded most of the sound there because
Oh, okay.
initially when he was editing, he was shooting, he himself recorded all the sound there. He himself shot and recorded, and suddenly he bring it to me like he has the film, and mostly design is done by him. So it was everything sorted out. I just need to work on a few bits and pieces, need to clean up a lot. That's all. And like we had fun. I really had fun. I learned a lot from Mukul, and because he was my senior at that time, and I gained. Yeah, it's fun.
I introduced him as a young filmmaker. But how, in terms of the sense of conflict and tension and all, did you do anything specific in terms of sound to create that feeling? Because the words, the what people say is very strong, and it really hits you. But in terms of sound, did you kind of add anything to it to?
Yeah, I added few things like just I will take one example. Suppose when there is no talkie happening, there is ambient sound where the montages comes, different visuals come. That's where sounds plays a major role. When you're already giving some kind of information by human being, presenting a human being, and this human being is like still that boy, the Anjan boy who is like in a military get up. He was still. He was still in the forest. Most of the time, he was still. But what kind of sound you will create? What kind of atmosphere you will create for him? It was quite challenging to do that because you have to understand what's going inside his mind first. So every time you see that person, you see a periodic kind of sound. Every time you see that Anjan in a visual, you see some kind of periodic insect sound or some kind of which has regular interval of sound is coming, very rapid sound. Maybe that person is very static, but he is very restless. He might be very restless. There is a movement in his thought. The movement in the sound is there. So I had that idea actually to bring out. I tried out. We just tried out the things. I think it worked in that way. It's very small thing, but it creates some kind of ambience, and it also helps you to pass the time because it's a kind of static film, and you need some kind of movement. There's not much of movement in your visual, but there is a movement in your sound. You have to make you have to create a formation of sound, which is very important, and which gives a sense of time also, time and emotion both.
Actually, we should have got some clips from there to show that, but I don't have, unfortunately. Yeah, thanks so much, Rahul. It's really enjoyable to see your work there. And
Thank you so much.
yeah. So, Mukul, is there? I mean. There's elements in your film that you kind of play with. I mean, which are there, not play with, but which are very strong and which are there in your short films also. This role of the mother or the older lady. And, she's there in most of your films. So what is that? Has it to do with your mother, or is it just a general kind of, I mean, why do you bring in this personality every time?
Yeah, I think this is very, kind of a personal experience only. I mean, I'm very close to my mother, and like we are three brothers in the family, and so mother actually, whatever her memories and experiences of the day and things. So she likes to talk to me about that, So I think because one thing is that mother character keeps coming to that coming to the works I do, like as a storyteller, as a keeper of history, keeper of memory, like and even while I was doing this docu, so not just my mother, but there are a lot of people, like the female group actually of So they had those secret stories and day-to-day impressions of that time. Like those things were not told by anyone. Like other people were telling the general thing. What you will hear everywhere. But suppose my mother or someone else, they used to tell that very what do you say, that those things which are actually felt by someone, felt like a human, like someone, there's a hungry boy comes to your home to eat and then he has to flee, while he's eating. So that sort of impressions, it remained with them. And those are the things, I think, the stories they told. So the character also becomes very important, who told those stories to me. So I think that is one thing. And that lady in my dialogue, short film Days of Autumn, she again comes back to act in another film of mine. And
yeah, I can show that.
yeah.
One
She
second.
was also, that was, I'll just briefly say that. So that bringing of that character was only about, bringing her back, bringing the actor back, because she was so interesting. She was so impressive, she, and
She
like
is.
how she, So
Yeah.
I wanted to write a character for her, like the mother figure.
Also, in terms of the mother figure, I thought that during the agitation, the mother, like you said, was not only providing feeding the revolutionaries, but was also part of the revolution, because she was losing sons to the cause, no? And becomes a central figure, I suppose, in a movement like that. In terms of, we can show that woman again. Raghu, can you play clip 3, please? Again, please look at how beautifully he designs his visuals.
ৰাতিপুৱাই কেনি যাওনো ঐ পুৰি মই পাৰলৈ ঔটেঙা পাৰিব যাওঁ আজি ঔটেঙাৰ লগত সৰু মাছ
এইটোনো কিবা সময় হ'লনে
সৃষ্টিৰ আৰম্ভণিতে গোটেই পৃথিৱী আছিল নিস্প্ৰাণ এদিন ৱকলাপকী চৰাইটোৱে ধপ ধপকৈ পাখি মেলি আহি পানীয় মৰা গছডালত বহি চৰাইজনীয়ে 3টা কণী পাৰিলে বহুত মৰম আৰু যত্নৰে চৰাইটিয়ে কণীকেইটাক দিলে প্ৰতিটো কণী ফুটি জন্ম হ'ল একোটা মানৱ প্ৰজাতিৰ সকলোতকৈ ধুনীয়া আৰু ডাঙৰ কণীটোৰ পৰা উপজিল পৃথিৱীৰ শেষৰটো মানৱ প্ৰজাতি হেয়া আমাৰ সম্প্ৰদায় এই শ্যামল ভূমি আৰু নদ-নদীক আমি নিজৰ ভাই ভনীৰ দৰে আকোৱালি ল'লোঁ এয়া আমাৰ জন্মভূমি উত্তৰাধিকাৰ সূত্ৰে পোৱা ঠাই কবিৰ কল্পনাত
So yeah, that's a letter to home, right? Can you? Yeah. So I mean, that's beautifully done. So any questions people have? So that I can continue chatting.
Yeah, there are no questions as of now.
As of now, okay. So I was talking earlier with Sushma, and actually this is supposed to be her question, but I'm going to ask you, is that she had noticed and she mentioned that, you know, in the ULFA meeting, there's a photograph of Bhupen Hazarika. So just wondering what is the reason? And you said earlier that he played a big role in this.
Yeah, he was kind of a cultural icon, definitely, and he had his songs were, I mean, like something like, you know, in a funny way, like for every occasions there will be a song for Bhupen Hazarika, because he has extensively worked around ideas of politics, ethnicity, you know, culture, and sort of things. Even like if you look at recent CA protests and all, so I mean the songs were his only. I mean, so he is regarded as, you know, kind of a icon of, you know, culture and ethnic identity. I mean, celebrating ethnic identity. So that's why he's there, you know, as a, like Mahatma Gandhi we put as a father of the nation. So Bhupen Hazarika has cultural icon of Assamese nationalism.
Yeah, and yeah, and also I wanted you to talk about the end of the film. You know, this conversation that you have. I mean, before that, actually, the film is also about several journeys that you make. No, not only in terms of a physical journey journeys that you see in the film. You know, that journey by train or by car, but also journey through time, and also through the movement in a way. Was that a kind of a thought? What is this thing of why did you get into a car and travel to so many different locations to capture what you are trying to show here?
Yeah, I mean, practically, we had traveled a lot around Assam. You know, the main places where the movement actually, I mean, it was happening. Like my district was one, Nalbari. Then there were a lot of places in Upper Assam and Middle Assam, from Nongkao to Dibrugarh, Chetia, and all those places. So, and there are a lot of people who could actually talk about that time, you know. And Shakya, my friend, he was from Gogoi, which is the Upper Assam, like almost the end of Assam border, like bordering Arunachal. So, I mean, the travel happened because of that. You know, we had to go to different people and meet them. You know, also we wanted to kind of for personally for us to revisit those places. You know, like suppose there is a jungle, there's a forest where there is to be a ULFA camp. You know, and there is to be, and then there's Operation Bajrang, which was done by Indian Army in 90s. So that happened in the jungle. So we just wanted to revisit, and it's not, maybe not for the film, you know, but as kind of things we grew up hearing about all those, you know, atrocities and all. So it's also kind of a personal journey for us to go see the places, experience certain they happened. And throughout the journey, Sakya and I used to talk a lot of things, you know, like so that last conversation or kind of a monologue of Sakya, so that was a product of that, you know, like it was not planned, it was not, I didn't ask any question to Sakya. So this was one of the many things we were talking throughout the journey. And while I was editing the film, then there is also, I also needed closer for the film, kind of way to end it, you know. So that conversation somehow felt like closer for the film. I'm not saying the closer for that whole thought about Alpha and, you know, our experience about it, but for the film, you know, like 60 minutes. I mean, you can't watch a 3 hour long docu about this. Maybe we can. We have
You
seen,
can.
but
Why not?
yeah, we can. So I mean, that was a closer for the film, and a lot of my friends, I mean, say that it sounds like a kind of a very neutral kind of an stand for that, like you don't put the blame on anyone. But that was the case. I mean, what to say? I mean, that was because that was not planned at all. I didn't ask Shakya to say like that, or I didn't ask any question to him. So that
But
was
the
a
fact
very
that you ended the film with that, what was the intention of that? In a kind of a very
yeah.
open-ended way, without a kind of what most people expect a resolution.
Yeah. So actually, this film, the thought of this film came from an article which was written by one of my friends in, I think, around 2008 or 7, when ULFA's the top leaders, they have came to India. They have I mean, India captured them in Bangladesh and Myanmar, and they were sent to jail, and they were released finally because they have started negotiating with the government regarding peace and So when they came out, so one of my friends, he was there, to welcome them, to Assam. A lot of people were there during that day in CGM court in Guwahati. So he had written an article after that, the next day, that he was thinking that the revolutionaries which we have heard about so much during our childhood, during our teenage, we thought he'll be someone like, I mean, like in a very cliche way, but he'll be someone like Che Guevara, like torn clothes, like very lean body. I mean, like very where you can see that hard work of 20 years, like you can see, but that was not the image he saw when they came out. So that really struck me, at that point. I mean, and that was actually that whole understanding, whole how this image has developed and how this image actually, I mean, it got diluted, it got, I mean, falsified, like so. That was it. That's why, like when Shakya talks about all this, like both sides, have played with the blood of innocence. So it actually has a valid point because they didn't stick to their ideology, they didn't stick to their policies, and they have diverted and basically become a kind of machineries of state only in certain way because in 90s there was Assam Governor Parishad government in Assam, which was a byproduct of that whole Assam movement and all. And there were a lot of killings, very infamous killings and all done by ULFA, and which was supposed to be believed by, sponsored by the state, and like where ULFA acted as a kind of a serial killers and all. There are a lot of angst in people's mind. I mean, so even now when there is talk about the CA and all, and if you look at Facebook, I mean, it's very interesting. I keep looking at it, and that the generation, the new generation also, there's a strong divide between like how they look at ULFA and how someone else look at it. Because there is a group who are the victim of ULFA's violence. There is a group who is not and who endorses ULFA's policies and all. So those two things are there.
Okay, so Sandhya has a question.
Yeah. Hi, Mukul. Hi, Sunanda.
Hi.
Hello.
So enjoyed the film and this conversation, and a real treat to be able to see Days of Autumn as well. I really think your sound design is exceptionally beautiful, and so is your framing. In the documentary, every time an unusual looking shot came, where for instance, there's one of them where there's that large concrete at the end of the water.
That statue.
And I wasn't quite sure. Yeah, where the statue is on top, but first you only see this wall, and I'm like, what could this kind of space be? And then when you move out and show the white, there are quite a few shots like this. And so my question to you was that do you do a conscious location recce even for documentary shoots, maybe similar to how you do for fiction, and then plan your shoots for documentary? Do you do that?
Particularly for this film, I actually didn't do much of recce, location.
Okay.
These places actually were known to me. Maybe we'll talk about that sequence of the statue or like places in the film. They're quite familiar to me. I mean, I have been there before, so I think that's why I didn't need that kind of a recce. But when I work with
But then do you
other
plan
film,
it?
other docu,
Yeah.
I do that. Yeah, I definitely yeah.
And do you do like a short breakdown, even a visual short breakdown for the documentary as a part of the scripting?
Yeah, I have a kind of a rough planning for the visuals, how it should be, how it should look like, but always doesn't,
Work out.
actualize in the, yeah. But
that's
to have an overall idea of the whole film, how it will look like. So it's more of an holistic idea rather than, shot by shot kind of a thing.
No, it's very, very unusual. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your film with Vikalp.
Okay. Thanks, Sandhya. And Sushma has a question.
Sunanda, Sushma has lost her voice, so
Okay.
you'll have to read it out.
Yeah, sorry. So Sushma, who is also part of Vikalp, Mukul, and a filmmaker, she asked that, she said that the flag hoisting scene where, they sing the Indian national anthem and then they just announce that, okay, now we'll sing the Assamese national anthem. So she wants to know if there's an ease and a comfort inhabiting both these identities, and or is the resistance to the centers, the state, still strong?
Thank you for asking this. I mean, I thought I should say this. I mean, at a certain point about that sequence. It's I think that was 2017 when I shot that sequence, and it was I think uh, after 20 years, I mean, that kind of independence, the celebration happened, because during 80s or during 90s, there never used to be any independence celebration or Republic Day. The government officials were asked to, they were ordered to hoist the flag and all, but there won't be any people because it was banned by ULFA, or it was actually banned by everyone, like we won't hoist the flag and all. So that kind of feeling was there. So that conflict of two nationalities, that's what is happening now. I mean, it was not that strong maybe till 90s. There is one kind of a nationality, like which is maybe you can say Assamese, idea of a nation state or Assamese cultural consciousness, and definitely other thing, definitely that the pan-Indian, not pan-Indian, I mean the right-wingness of certain political ideologies started coming in during Assam movement only, and it had grown to a large extent. And I think for the last 10 years, that imposition of another cultural consciousness that is happening. And I think in that sequence, it's quite evident, how. And I think in the film also you see that, like, I have a phone call from my mother, and then she says that your father is in the school and the government is ordered to celebrate the Independence Day. So it's like an order, it's not that you do it from your heart, like you are not doing it with great satisfaction, happiness. So.
And now there is another identity, right, of the original Assamese and versus the foreigner, which is a third identity that is being fought on now, right?
Right. Yeah. But that has been there since 80s only, since some movement that has actually come to the forefront, like who is Assamese, who is not, and who are the other tribal groups who don't speak Assamese, those conflicts.
Oh, there's Jitu's asked a question.
Yes, Jitu would like to. Yeah.
Kalita,
Can you
hi, Mukul. Can you listen to me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, congratulations. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
First of all, congratulations. It has been such a wonderful film, and I would say, since I'm from Assam, I know this whole scenario with ULFA. We still don't discuss ULFA publicly. Some people support them. Some people have different opinions about them, as you said. So it's a I won't say brave attempt, but it's a very conscious and sincere attempt to show the whole scenario. And I would also tell you that my favorite shot from the film is that when you take a picture of the statue of Lachit Borphukan near the Brahmaputra river. Yeah. As I saw the shot, I was confused. Like, is it a screen only? But as the camera goes up, I could understand that it's the statue. So my question to you, Mukulda, is that if you think about Assam, there are so many superstitious thoughts, so many problems related to day-to-day life. Like for example, I would tell you, nowadays we are maintaining social distancing, but then when girls go through their their period days, there is more social distancing in the society. So do you plan to make more cinema depicting social problems, or is there a necessity of also making entertainment-based films or so-called commercial films? Because there's also this demand of earning money for livelihood. So how is this whole thing? How are you planning to manage this whole thing?
Jitu, I didn't get your last part because a call came. I mean, I'm doing it from my phone. Sorry. I mean, I lost you in that about social problems, making film about social problems.
Yeah. So as I was saying, let me reframe. I see a kind of similarity between your work and Rima Das, the renowned filmmaker, her work. The recent 2 movies I have seen her, like there is some kind of similarity, the way, especially in camera work and sound. So my question is, like, as we see so much discrimination happening, so much superstitions, around in Assamese society. For example, as I was talking, there is less social distancing during COVID and more social distancing during period days, with girls. So are you planning to make more cinema depicting this whole real scene of Assamese culture, or are you also have this temptation of making commercial movies? Because we all know, because at a certain point of time we need money and stuff. So how do you plan your future work?
That's a big question, Zilu. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the social problems. I mean, because this particularly about this film, it was actually very personal film. Like rather than being a social issue and all, like because you have lived through this time, right? So even now, I mean, if I make a film about suppose you, so that is also the surrounding, like well, let it be political surrounding or social or cultural. So those things definitely come in, So I don't know, like whether particularly about one specific social issue we have to make film, but also if that issue, if it is coming from that community, suppose like if someone else makes that film rather than me making a film about period, because it should come from the inside. I mean that from the people who have experienced it, I feel in a certain way.
He's talking about commercial versus independent. Are you going to be what is your, and I also wanted to tie in my last question with that, is that what are you planning to do next? Are you planning to make a fiction film feature?
Yeah, I would definitely, I mean, love to make a fiction, and I'm thinking about it. And in scenario, because this is again going to be in Assamese and in Assam scenario, and it's not, it doesn't have a kind of a commercial that setup, like you can make a film and release and make profit. So that thing is definitely not there because of lack of cinema halls. Again, because of ULFA bombed the halls during 2000s. So. So that commercial aspect is definitely not there. So I think I would like to continue with the kind of work I'm doing, little fiction or non. That's fun.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. So thank you so much, Mukulda, for your yeah. Thank you so much. You keep us closer to nature. I feel like that, and the poem in the movie was just wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jitu. Thank you. That's fantastic. Those are very nice last words to end our conversation with. Thank you so much, Mukul, for sharing your film with us and for being here. Thank you from Vikalp Bengaluru and BIC. Thank you, Rahul, for your fantastic work. Hope to see more work of yours.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'd love to see your other work too. And thank you, Raghu, for hosting us. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Sunanda.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Great conversation.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.